Hey everybody, this is Dr. Langdon, board certified pediatrician, fellow of the American Academy of Pediatrics, and mother to 6 adult children now. Currently serving as chair of pediatrics at the local medical school. Today I'd like to talk with you guys about a bacteria, Haemophilus influenza B, and how much incredible good the vaccination program for that has done. I'm a little bit old compared to many pediatricians these days, because I graduated from medical school way back in 1995, in the 1900s. Well, I can still remember. See, the vaccine came into effect in the late 1980s, early 1990s, and I can still remember that my attending physicians were still very respectful of Hib, Haemophilus influenza B, and how much damage it could do. So just so you get the gravity of this, before we had that vaccine implemented in the late 1980s, there were around 20,000 cases a year of Haemophilus influenza B infections, and it's a very invasive bacteria. A lot of people call it invasive Haemophilus influenza B. Well, it was the number one cause of bacterial meningitis in children under 5. So that's part of why all infants who had a high fever had to be evaluated not only with blood cultures, that's a blood draw from their tiny veins, and a urine catheterization to culture their urine, but they also had to have a lumbar puncture or a spinal tap, some people call it, because this was such a common cause of sudden high fever, very sick children, pitiful. And then sometimes when we would get the cerebrospinal fluid out, it came out looking purulent or like pus. It was horrible. So number one cause of bacterial meningitis in children under 5 before the vaccine. Here's the beautiful thing. After the vaccine, the number of cases plummeted from 20,000 every single year, down to under 100, and some say under 50 cases per year. But that's when children were routinely receiving all of the recommended vaccinations. The other thing Hib could do was cause inflammation and dangerous swelling of the epiglottis. So it caused something called epiglottitis. And that is one of the most terrifying things. That's what I specifically remember my attendings. If a child came in with stridor, that high-pitched, noisy, loud sound as they're breathing in. It can be several things, including croup. And now we just sort of go straight to thinking of croup because we've enjoyed this sudden and dramatic immediate drop in cases of Hib once the vaccine was introduced, that I've never seen a case of Hib epiglottitis because I didn't start residency until 1995 to 98. And so the vaccine was already being received by all the children then. And so I've never seen a case of actual epiglottitis. Isn't that wild? But the attendings were still terrified because if those babies came in with bacterial epiglottitis caused by Hib, if you upset them at all, they would just close off their airway and die. And so you had to get anesthesia involved and sometimes even ENT involved, and they had to have a trach placed under anesthesia, but they were scared and crying so they could just die. It was terrifying. And so I think when a lot of people argue specifically that, oh, we don't see those germs today because we have better hygiene, then I need for them to look at the actual data of 20,000 cases. And this was in the late 1980s. We had had hygiene for some time by then, and kids were still dying of bacterial meningitis and epiglottitis. And then exactly after the vaccine was introduced against Hib, and then all of the Hib cases disappeared, nearly all, that's not just improved hygiene that suddenly hit us in the early 1990s. That was one of the most absolutely clear-cut, positive, beneficial advantages from the vaccine itself. So if you want to avoid for your newborn you can get the vaccine first at 2 months. So for your young infants, you want to avoid bacterial meningitis and life-threatening epiglottitis, you should receive the Haemophilus influenza vaccine. And it's very, very effective and very, very safe. So we worry some today as our vaccine rates continue to decrease based on increased vaccine hesitancy, based on bad information on social media. We worry that we're going to see more and more of this invasive bacterial infection. So I urge you to trust trusted sources like the American Academy of Pediatrics and your local pediatrician who understands that vaccines are both safe and effective and incredibly life-saving. And we genuinely believe in them, or we wouldn't give them to our own children and to our patients that we love dearly. Please let me know if you have any questions about invasive Haemophilus influenza B infections, meningitis and epiglottitis in specific, or any questions about the vaccine that is safe and effective to prevent those infections. Thanks, guys.